What would you do if the person you loved made the biggest decision of your life without telling you? Would you forgive them? Stay? Walk away? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. And if you're drawn to stories like this, stories that don't give easy answers but leave you feeling something, subscribe to my channel for new emotionally raw queer stories every week. Hit the bell. Stay with me. Let me tell you about Hannah. She dated men. Always had. Until one breakup shattered her so deeply, she packed her life into a car and drove until the city lights looked different. New state, new name at the coffee shop, new rules. That's when she met her. I used to think Hannah was the kind of girl who would end up married young, have a matching Instagram family, and pretend to be happy even when she wasn't. She played the role well, smiles in filtered light, brunch photos, hand-holding at concerts, and the occasional bikini pic with a caption like, "Loved by the sun." But if you knew her past a post, you saw it. The restlessness in her bones, the tug of war between who she was and who she thought she had to be. She was 23 when it all started to unravel. At that point, she had been dating Liam for 3 years. He was older, charming in that self-obsessed way, like he'd memorized all the lines women wanted to hear. In the beginning, he made her feel wanted. Not just loved, wanted, and that mattered to her more than she let on. But Liam also knew the power of silence. He knew how to pull away just enough to make her chase. And Hannah? She chased like her worth depended on it. Fights became patterns. One night, she found a text on his phone from someone named Elle. Just a heart emoji and a photo. Nothing graphic, but enough to punch the air out of her lungs. She confronted him, hoping, maybe stupidly, that he'd apologize, explain, say it meant nothing. Instead, he smiled. Actually smiled. Then said, "You're not easy to love, Hannah." You know that, right? She didn't cry in front of him. She packed a bag, left at 2 a.m. in a hoodie and flip-flops, moved into her cousin's apartment in a different state by the weekend. And that was it. She burned the bridge so thoroughly there wasn't even ash left behind. The first few months after the move were quiet. She got a job at a vintage store, learned the bus routes, read books about queer theory, and watched indie films she didn't understand. She didn't say out loud that she was questioning anything, but something cracked open inside her. One night, she downloaded a dating app and switched the setting to women. She didn't tell anyone, just scrolled, lingered on the soft-eyed profiles, the ones with no filters, girls in messy buns, jean jackets, thrift store skirts. She went on her first date with a girl named Kaya. It was awkward, too many silences, too many nervous laughs. But when Kaya leaned in to kiss her at the end of the night, Hannah didn't pull away. She let it happen. The softness of it hit her differently. There was no rush, no pressure, just lips that tasted like mint and nerves. Later, in her bedroom, she sat on the floor with the lights off, hand pressed to her chest like she could hold her own heartbeat still. She didn't label herself that night. She didn't need to. Something had shifted. Then came Jules. Jules was older by 6 years, confident in the way that didn't need performance. She wore dark jeans and boots, worked as a photojournalist, and had a laugh that made people glance over in restaurants. They met at a queer open mic. Hannah read a poem she swore she'd never share. Jules came up afterward, touched her wrist lightly, and said, "You write like you've been hiding your whole life." Their first date was at a late-night diner. Their second date ended with Hannah pressed against the kitchen wall, kissed breathless between laughter and clumsy fumbling hands. That night, in Jules' apartment, with the glow of a salt lamp casting shadows on the wall, Hannah undressed slowly. Not like she had with men, rushed, hesitant, defensive. With Jules, it was curious, unfolding. She remembered the way Jules took her time, how their bodies found rhythm without needing to speak, how intimacy became something playful, warm, and God, so alive. It wasn't just about pleasure. It was about being known. Jules stayed the night, and the next. By month 3, Hannah had a drawer in her dresser. By month 6, she had a key. They fit. Imperfectly, beautifully. But cracks don't wait for permission. Jules didn't want children. Not now, maybe not ever. She made that clear, gently but firmly. Hannah smiled when they talked about it, said things like, "Me neither," or "not for a long time." But somewhere deep inside, she knew she wasn't being honest. She wanted a baby. She wanted the proof of love. Something tangible. Something no one could walk away from. She told herself Jules would come around, that once they were more stable, Jules would change her mind. But the seed was already planted. Not in her body, yet, but in her brain. The fantasy grew. And somewhere in that dangerous space between longing and logic, she reached for a solution that made sense only to her. And that's when Liam's name came back into her inbox. Hannah had never felt new before. Not really. Even when she moved to another state, even when she changed jobs, she still felt like she was dragging the old version of herself behind her, like a too heavy suitcase. But something shifted once Jules entered her life. Jules didn't ask her to explain who she was or where she came from. She didn't try to figure Hannah out. And that freedom, that space, felt like oxygen after years of suffocating. They weren't instant, not in the storybook way. It started with long conversations over takeout containers and quiet walks through the city at night. Jules had this ability to make silence feel full. When she looked at you, she didn't look through you. She looked into. Hannah started sleeping over at Jules' place more often, until it became the norm. Jules' apartment was small, but had warmth in every corner. Messy bookshelves, candles burned down to the wick, dried lavender hanging above the stove. And then came that night. The one Hannah would remember in pieces, in flashes, as if her brain had been too overwhelmed to record it all at once. It wasn't wild or cinematic. It wasn't about performance. It was about presence. Jules had come home from a shoot, her cheeks still pink from the cold, camera bag slung over her shoulder. Hannah had been curled up on the couch in Jules' oversized hoodie, flipping through a poetry book she barely understood. There was nothing particularly romantic about the moment, nothing dramatic. But Jules leaned down, brushed her fingers along Hannah's collarbone, and kissed her like she meant it. Not a peck, not a tease. Something deeper, like she was saying, "I want all of you, not just the parts you show to the world." The couch became too small, the floor too cold. They found the bed eventually. It wasn't Hannah's first time with a woman, but it was the first time it felt right. Jules was patient. Her hands explored like they had all the time in the world. There was laughter, shy glances, small gasps shared like secrets. The light from the hallway barely reached them, casting soft shadows across skin and tangled sheets. It was in that intimacy, not just physical, but emotional, that Hannah realized this wasn't a phase. It wasn't a rebound or a reaction. It was her becoming. In the days that followed, their routines began to overlap. Jules liked her coffee black and her mornings quiet. Hannah liked soft music and the slow ritual of making breakfast. They learned to share space like water, filling two halves of the same glass. They weren't perfect. Jules was fiercely independent. Hannah still wrestled with insecurities she hadn't yet named. Sometimes she got too clingy, too quiet. Sometimes Jules pulled away without meaning to. But the way they came back to each other, again and again, made it feel solid. They held hands at queer bars and danced until their hair stuck to their necks. They went to Pride together, painted rainbows on each other's cheeks, kissed beneath glitter-filled skies. There was something so powerful in being seen as a couple. Two women, unapologetically together. For Hannah, it felt like staking a claim on something she'd once been too afraid to admit. This is who I am. Still, in the quieter moments, There were questions she hadn't answered yet. Sometimes, in the stillness of night, when Jules was asleep beside her, Hannah would stare at the ceiling and think about the future, about her body, about motherhood, about how much of her identity had been shaped by the idea that being a woman meant giving life. Jules had told her, months earlier, that she wasn't sure about kids. Not in a bitter way, just honesty. She didn't dream of nurseries or bedtime stories. She dreamed of travel, of photo exhibits, of late nights in strange cities. Hannah said she understood. She even said she felt the same. But she didn't. Not completely. Because deep down, she wanted a child. Not tomorrow. Maybe not even next year. But she wanted to carry something forward. Something living. Something that proved her love had weight. She wanted that child to grow up in a home full of softness. A home where two women loved each other out loud. She wanted it with Jules. But she didn't say that. Instead, she buried the wanting, tucked it away behind smiles and kisses and late-night takeout. And as much as she loved Jules, and she did, in a way that felt bone-deep, she started to feel the hunger creep back in. The hunger for control, for certainty, for something that couldn't be taken away from her. That's when she reinstalled the old app. Just to look, she told herself. Just to see. But Liam's name was still there, right where she left it. A message she never answered. One that read, "You okay?" Her fingers hovered over the screen, then tapped. "Hey, I moved." "Things are different now," he replied within minutes. The message to Liam should have meant nothing. That's what Hannah told herself when she sent it. Just a curiosity, a flicker, nothing more. But curiosity, when mixed with unresolved power, rarely stays small. Liam hadn't changed much. Still cocky, still careless, still knew exactly how to push her buttons without ever sounding like he was trying. But from the safety of her new life, he didn't feel threatening anymore. If anything, he felt like an unfinished chapter, a page she'd left dog-eared and unread. They messaged for a few days. Polite, surface level. He asked about her new city. She asked how things had been. She told herself she was just tying loose ends, that she was taking control of her narrative. Then one night, Jules had to travel for a shoot. Just a weekend. Nothing out of the ordinary. Hannah didn't plan to see Liam. Not really. But he offered to meet for coffee. "No pressure," he said. "Just catching up." So she said yes. He looked the same, maybe a little more tired around the eyes, a little more worn in. But when he smiled, it pulled at something old inside her, something complicated. They talked for an hour, then 2. She laughed more than she expected, not because he was funny, but because it felt strange to be across from someone who used to own so much of her, and now barely knew who she was. She didn't tell him about Jules, not yet. And when he brushed his hand across hers as they stood outside the cafe, she didn't pull away. The first time they slept together again, it was clumsy, not passionate, not romantic, just calculated. She didn't feel guilty, not in the way she expected. Because it wasn't about Liam. It wasn't even about sex. It was about the plan. She had made her decision before she ever met him for coffee. Jules didn't want kids. And Hannah did. But not just any child. She wanted one with them, with her and Jules. She pictured it constantly. Soft baby clothes folded into drawers. Jules taking photos of their daughter sleeping on her chest. Lullabies sung between tired, happy sighs. She tried to bring it up once. Casual, over dinner. "What if one day I wanted a baby?" she asked, lightly, as if it didn't matter. Jules had blinked, thought for a long time, then answered softly, "I don't think I'd be the right person for that. I'd love you, and I'd love the kid, but I'd feel like I was forcing something I don't want. And that's not fair to either of you." It wasn't harsh, it wasn't cold, but it was a full stop. So Hannah created her own comma. The plan, as she saw it, wasn't about betrayal. It was about future-proofing. She would get pregnant, and she would raise the child with Jules. Not because of the biology, but because of the bond. They'd be a queer family, not perfect, not traditional, but real. She told herself Jules would come around. She loved fiercely. Surely that love would grow to include something more. Surely! So Hannah kept meeting Liam, for weeks, kept sleeping with him, even as it made her skin crawl afterward. She'd shower in silence, scrub herself clean, then crawl into bed with Jules like nothing happened. She tracked her cycle, took tests, waited. And one morning, as the sun bled through the window, she held the stick in her hand and stared at the word. Pregnant. She sat on the edge of the tub, heart not racing, breathing steady. This was what she wanted. Wasn't it? Telling Jules was the hardest part. Not because of the pregnancy, but because of the how. At first, she thought about lying, saying it was an accident from before they met, but that wouldn't hold. So she told the truth. Or her version of it. They were curled up on the couch when she said it, voice flat. I need to tell you something. Jules sat up. The shift in energy was instant. I'm pregnant. A beat, a breath. What? Jules' voice was soft, confused. With Liam, Hannah said. But I want this baby, with you. I want us to raise it. The silence that followed was unbearable. You what? Jules whispered. I didn't plan to fall back into it with him, but I needed to do this. I want a child. I want a family, with you. Jules stood, moved toward the window, rubbed her face like she was trying to wake up. You cheated on me, and now you want me to… What? Pretend that's not what it was? It wasn't love, Hannah said quickly. It was just biology. It was for us. Jules turned slowly. Her expression was unreadable. Hurt, yes. But more than that, betrayed. You lied to me, she said, voice cracking. Every day, every night. You slept beside me and lied. Hannah reached out, but Jules stepped back. I forgave you for things I didn't even know about, Jules said. But this? You planned this. You made a choice without me. I made it for us, Hannah whispered. No, Jules said. You made it for you. The days that followed were a blur. Jules didn't move out right away. She said she needed time. Said she didn't want to make decisions in anger. They tried to talk. Tried to patch over the wound. Jules even stayed for a few ultrasound appointments. Held Hannah's hand. Cried a little when they saw the heartbeat. But there was a distance between them now that couldn't be crossed. Hannah pretended not to notice it, but she did. Every second. She told herself that once the baby was born, Jules would come back fully. That love would win. That families look all kinds of ways. But in the dark, when Jules faced away from her in bed, and the silence stretched too long, Hannah started to realize the truth. This wasn't a future, it was the fallout. The apartment got quieter in the weeks that followed. Not physically, there were still sounds. The hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the floorboards, the shuffle of Jules getting ready for work before sunrise. But the kind of silence that filled the space was personal. It was the silence of two people, pretending they weren't already leaving each other. Jules didn't move out. Not yet. She still made coffee in the morning, still kissed Hannah on the cheek when she came home, still said, "You okay?" Every time Hannah got pale or nauseous. But something was gone. It wasn't the love. That was still there, quiet and stubborn. It was the trust, the fragile thread that holds even the best love together. Jules tried. She really did. She went with Hannah to prenatal appointments, helped her buy maternity clothes, even started journaling, something she hated, to try and make sense of her feelings. But no matter how much she pushed, the same wall stood between them. You lied to me. You made a family without me. then asked me to play along. And Hannah? She couldn't take it back. She didn't want to take it back. Sometimes late at night, Hannah would lie awake staring at the ceiling, one hand resting over the small curve of her stomach. The baby was real now, moving, fluttering, changing her shape. She imagined holding her, telling her bedtime stories, tucking her into soft cotton sheets, and whispering, "You were wanted. I did everything for you." But even that fantasy had changed, because in her heart, Hannah knew Jules wouldn't be there. She'd hoped motherhood would make Jules fall in love with her all over again, that the baby would be the bridge between them. But the truth was uglier. Jules had fallen in love with Hannah's honesty. And the version of Hannah she had now, the one with secrets buried under apologies, wasn't the woman Jules had said yes to. The final conversation happened on a Tuesday. Nothing special about the day. No dramatic music or rain. Just overcast skies and a room that had seen too much. Hannah was folding baby clothes on the couch when Jules walked in, jacket still damp from the mist outside. She sat down without speaking, took a breath like it physically hurt her to do it. "I can't do this anymore," she said softly. Hannah looked up, her hands still holding a tiny onesie. "You're leaving," she said flatly. Not a question, just the truth out loud. Jules nodded. "I love you. I probably always will, but I can't build a life on something I didn't choose." "You chose me," Hannah whispered. Jules looked away. "Number Y chose who I thought you were." The words didn't land with a crash. They landed like dust, soft, inevitable, impossible to ignore. Hannah didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just nodded, like she'd already known, like she'd been living in the goodbye for weeks now. Jules packed slowly over the next few days. No yelling, no accusations, just quiet sorting. Books, shirts, a coffee mug from a trip they took to Portland. When she left, she hugged Hannah for a long time, rested her hand gently on the curve of her belly, and whispered something Hannah didn't catch. And then she was gone. The baby was born in April. A girl, just like she'd imagined. Soft, pink-skinned, and impossibly small. Hannah named her Marlo, and when she held her for the first time, she cried. Not from pain, or fear, or even joy. She cried because for the first time in her life, she felt certain. This child was hers, not because of blood, not because of a plan, but because she was here, real, breathing. Jules didn't come to the hospital, but a letter arrived 2 weeks later. It was short, typed, like she couldn't bring herself to write it by hand. "I hope she has your eyes. I hope you teach her softness, but also fire. I can't be part of this, not because I don't care, but because I care too much to pretend this didn't change everything. I loved you. That was real. Maybe it still is, but some things don't survive the way they were planted. I hope you both grow anyway. Jules." Hannah read it twice, then folded it neatly and tucked it into the baby book under letters from people who mattered. Now, when people ask, she says she's a single mom by choice. Most don't ask for more. She doesn't tell them the story, doesn't explain the middle, the love, the betrayal, the plan that felt like purpose but ended in loss. She just holds Marlo a little tighter, tells her stories about strong women, about queer families and quiet courage, about mistakes that didn't ruin everything, even when they cracked the ground beneath them. And sometimes, late at night, when Marlo is asleep against her chest and the house is finally still, Hannah lets herself wonder, would Jules have stayed if she had told the truth from the start? Would love have been enough if she'd let it be messy and honest instead of trying to engineer it? She doesn't have answers, but she has her daughter, and the weight of every choice that got her here.